First of all, you've been on stage this morning. It's been a busy day. How are you finding the Vectors 2019 event?
Inspiring. I'm running into people who are living their life, living their destiny. There are people who actually are taking technology, some of that was conceived of 20 plus years ago, and making it real. And part of my talk today was really about the fact that we're living in the golden age of telecom. It didn't say it as a title, but ideas and services that my friends we used to pontificate about literally in the mid to late 90s became real. And finally, we don't have to say, what if this, what if that? Now it's just deliver this, deliver that. And so what was imagined has become real, and we sort of manifested that future. And so it's very empowering to see that happen. And so I look around in astonishment. I mean, it is true, I did start the company that's known as Vonage. I didn't realize how evil it might be around here. But to see a session about how to compete with Vonage is like, wow.
I did wonder if you were delivering that session, but then I thought that's too contradictory.
If there was a session, if I knew about that session in advance, I would have maybe sat in that room and said, what about this? What about that? Because it turns out that if you want to compete with somebody, the key to everything is not to compete with yourself. It's like when I used to work on Wall Street, and I was there during the transition from analog to digital, and we spent a lot of money transitioning from an analog system to a digital delivery. We were hurting every time something failed, we hurt our company so much more than any of our competitors could. That we were doing more damage to us than anyone from the outside. And so when you try to compete, sometimes you need to have a bullseye for a target to go after to sort of get the momentum going and to focus. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we don't compete with ourselves. And then we have the focused and understanding what we're actually going after, what are we fighting for, and then how do we outdo them? I mean, arguably, you can disrupt Vonage. Arguably, if you are really good at understanding your customers' needs, or you're really good at understanding what the near future brings, then you can deliver a solution that is custom made for them. And more than anything else, as we get more and more more distant, actually caring about people and bringing people into the conversation, and customers are not just for sales quotas, they're for relationships, to have the opportunity to actually have coffee or tea with a customer, actually make them understand that they mean much more to you than just a number. That is stuff that most people do not do. And if you're competing with Vonage, you're probably also dealing with Verizon and every big telco. And the reality is, going after the SME business is a business that most others are not, the large companies are not going after, because they can't scale to do so. They can't deliver personal communications and personal contacts and build up customer loyalty. At the end of the day, the very large companies we love to hate, right? We trust them, but yet we love to not like them. You could be likable, you could be lovable, you can actually not be something of hate, but of love. And there's not enough love in the world as it is. So to actually provide services and to be liked at least, or appreciated by those that you're providing for, is not a bad thing. So I'm from I'll call it the love economy. I believe if you love what you do, you shine with it. And if you could bring other customers into your life that are actually appreciative of what you're doing for them, when there's a problem, we talk about it. And maybe they inspire us to deliver more services for them. And if something's not understood, we get the benefit of the doubt that we can fix it. So if you're just dealing with people that are in hate, I believe in light. It's one of those things that light wins over darkness. And so I like to maybe cast a certain shadow for certain companies. So usually that's for fun. But if I'm a reseller, if I'm someone who's taking this technology, wrapping it with my name, my brand, and I have an opportunity to build a relationship that can last the next 30 years, I'm going to do that. And then I have loyalty. And I think loyalty doesn't go away. That if we can build real relationships with real people, that as that person goes from company to company, there's an opportunity that I can close more sales just by staying connected.
Yeah, it's a really noble philosophy. I wanted to pick your brain while I have you. And as someone who was there at sort of the inception of the industry...
At creation, I was there. It is true.
At creation.
I might have created some of the stuff that we're now fighting for.
So has the industry turned out as you had expected, or did you have any idea of sort of the potential? I suppose you did, because you were working on it and you were, as you said, pontificating with friends and colleagues about what it might be like. Has it turned out as you expected, or has it sort of snowballed into this giant, uncontrollable corporate monster?
Well, there's yes, no's, maybes in there. The reality is, in 1995, when I launched what was the first phone network in the world based on the internet called Free World Dial-Up, it was a few people just having fun. And we were proving that in the future, we will deliver voice communication via the internet. That was the concept, that we can actually do that. And then that quickly transitioned into a revolution. By 1999, these hardware switches were being replaced with soft switches. And then it was like, okay, what about mass adoption? Because I remember sitting on a panel in 1997 with the CTO of AT&T, and we were talking about internet telephony. He said to my face, we don't play with toys. 2 years later, they're writing billion-dollar contracts to buy soft switches, so hello. So, but a lot of times, people in the large companies were deploying technology simply replacing what they used to do. They were not innovating. You know, for people who are familiar with functionality in, let's say, a Class 5 switch, they might not realize that it was their uncle, their father, their grandfather in 1965 had a request from an enterprise customer, and that became function number 3005. When soft switches were recreated or created in 1998, 1999, even today, people don't look for that triple ticket to say, what was a problem that new feature solved? They just poured it over. So we're not innovating, we're replicating. So that's a big challenge. And so when I was always advocating that if you were a doctor in 1965 and you're still practicing in 1999, if you're not relearning your craft, people may not do so well. A lot of vendors did not like hearing that because it was easy for them to copy, paste, replicate, and not worry about innovating. But how has it evolved? Well, in the beginning, we had consumers we went after. Vonage, up until the launch of Vonage, there was a big internal debate. Are we a consumer service or are we a business service? Ultimately, today, Vonage is seeing great success going after businesses. But they spent a lot of money building up brand awareness to go after consumers. But it turns out today, when I was modeling FreeWheel Dollop, we had 3 different versions. We went from the PSTN gateways to now end-to-end IP. We were using Cisco 7960 phones. Those are enterprise-grade phones. And so it turned out that in the end, what we were foreshadowing is that the future of cloud-based communications was for enterprise. Now, you can define an enterprise as an individual company, or a company of 1, or of 10,000. Back in 2003-ish, I had a service provider called M5. They've been acquired since. And they used to require, they were based in New York City. I had an office in Melville, which is maybe an hour or so drive. And they used to make me have a dedicated T1 to deliver their service to me. I said, no, I want you to deliver it over my cable modem. They fought tooth and nail with me. I'm saying, look, I have a cable modem. It's not a T1. It's so much cheaper. And they more or less refused. And then when they finally tried it out, it failed too many times. But ultimately, I helped push them into the cloud. And so what would happen when we can now scale like that is companies, events like this, at the end of the day, are really scary to the telcos of the world. Because it means that everybody has the power to compete. That it's no longer an uneven playing field. And I saw this coming a long time ago. I used to talk about this. The people that are now the customers in this ecosystem were not touchable 20 years ago, but they're touchable today. And in fact, the biggest growth opportunity is here. That when you have a small market and it's growing, you're taking away from the incumbents. And the incumbents are going to figure out who they're going to go after, because the incumbents are always playing the 80-20 rule, right? That basically 20% of their customers represent 80% of their revenue. So they're going to let go because they can't afford necessarily not to be cherry-picked. So it kind of works out. But in terms of cool new services, I had sessions at my conferences about cool new services, about things that we could do, things that were practical. And then reality hit, because when companies started copying Vonage on the consumer side, and you saw around the world 300 telcos or 300 cable companies now offering digital phone services, you'd realize that most consumers don't care.
Yeah, they don't need it. They don't care.
They don't care. But I get so consumed by all these rich, cool features that we could do that then a friend of mine was sitting with Time Warner, going to a customer trying to turn on turning on the digital phone service, and he said, Jeff, you have to understand the average IQ of one of our customers is not necessarily the type of people who come to your conferences. And while you may be debating about why don't you do this, why don't you do that, we're first replacing what they had. So we have to give them as much reliability as their analog phone.
You just want to hit feature parity, effectively.
Yes, and so that was such a hard blow to me. Like, what about this? It's like, no. And then they explained to me, voicemail, great idea, took a long time to take off. But as the consumer gets more educated about what's possible, we can now be much more quick in delivering services. And the reality is that the biggest challenge for us is not going after the telco's existing business market. To me, it's the millennials.
The new market.
The new market is not based on it's not based on politics, not based on religion, not based on them. It's actually a huge communication gap, a bigger gap than we've seen in history in the last 100 years, which is how do we bridge over to the millennials? I believe that if we don't act quickly, the millennial community will build their own phone services, their own communication services, because they communicate differently than we do. Even though we are of the same origin, most of us, we can't always connect. And it's technology that's bringing us apart. You know, it's like when you text somebody and you by accident use the wrong emoji, or use a capital letter, or use punctuation, like, oh my God. And you can't recover from that. It's so hard. And you know, it's like over the last 10 years, this language came out, and many of us who are out of school don't know it. And we're faking it as we're trying to communicate in a meaningful way, and we're embarrassing ourselves in the meantime. And it's like, how is this? But there's that culture. So if there was a way to create a communication service where we can make some of the millennials still in high school product managers, where they could actually help us to define the sectors and services to deliver, that's beautifully magic. I used to tell this at the Vaughn conferences that you want the kids, the summer interns, they should be product manager for the month. And listen to the way the kids think about how they're communicating in the future. That future is now. You know, it's sort of like I always warn people since 2007 that if you're an adult and you have kids or grandparents, and you notice these small little fingerprints on your screens, it's because your grandkids or your kids are playing with your devices thinking that they should intuitively be squeezable. And I believe in 2020, 2021, we will see a UI UX revolution, that the kids that have grown up will now create devices that work the way they intuitively think they should. They're not going to wait for us to evolve, they're going to do it for us. And I think that's where communication services go too, that yes, very big market for people who understand the analog to the digital transition. But for people growing up in a world where they don't understand that FaceTime did not exist before they were born, they don't understand the internet just wasn't so reliable. This is all stuff they take for granted. They will create communication services that work for their needs. Our challenge is communicating with them and working with them to build to service them too, before they disintermediate us, but because there is that opportunity. Outside of the millennial stuff, which I totally missed, one of the companies that I started a long time ago, besides Vonage, through the Vaughn conferences, was another company called vivix. Vivix became the largest provider of hosted voice services for massive multiplayer online games. Oh, cool. So when Second Life happened, they were the voice on Second Life.
And Esports, huge market.
And Fortnite, their engine is actually how people now scream and shout at each other while they're gaming. And that became a huge market. I missed the opportunity to watch people play. While it's mesmerizing, I didn't realize that esports would be such a big opportunity. But it's all about communicating. It's about connecting. It's about sharing those experiences. Because you have one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, many-to-one conversations. Sometimes it's many-to-one watching. Sometimes we're speaking. The ways that we communicate evolve with time, but never goes away is the opportunity to actually have a meaningful conversation. And that is, I think, that is one of those killer apps that will never go away, is the need to communicate. And that when we can share a voice, when we can be with somebody, that's magical. And if you can't be there in person, having technology that delivers a high-grade user experience so it feels like you're there is priceless.